There is a concrete block, a coil of rope, and a bundle of cedar limbs sitting in the back of my wagon right now. $4, all in. By the end of the month, that little pile is going to hold more fish than the whole rest of the pond put together. Not attract. Hold. There is a difference. And it is the difference between a good afternoon and an empty bucket. I have fished the same water for 51 years. There are 7 of these piles in it now. And I put the first one down when I was 19 and did not really know what I was doing. That first one is still there. It is mostly gone to mud by now, but it holds bluegill in numbers that would embarrass a hatchery. And every bass in that end of the pond knows where it is. I want to say something plain at the start, because this is the part that will change how you fish more than any bait or any rod ever will. An empty bucket day is almost never a fish problem. It is a location problem. The fish were in that pond the whole time you were out there. They were 40 yards from where you were standing, and there was nothing wrong with your worm. My grandfather did this every winter of his life. He would take down a cedar in the fence line in January when the sap was down, cut it into 3 pieces, and haul them out on the ice. I asked him one time, when I was 8 or 9, why he was throwing away good firewood. He did not answer me. He handed me the end of a rope and told me to hold it. That was how he taught most things. Today I'm going to tell you why 9/10 of your pond is empty water, what a fish is actually looking for when it picks a place to live, exactly how to build one of these for $4, where to put it, and how deep, and the one step that almost every man skips, which is the step that decides whether it works at all. And then I am going to tell you the part that ought to sit uneasy with you, which is that none of this is a secret. Your state fisheries agency does it. They have crews that do nothing else. It has been in their bulletins for 60 years. The tackle trade simply never had a reason to bring it up. Stay with me. The first thing you have to understand is that a pond is mostly desert. You look out at the water and it looks the same all the way across. It is not. Underneath, that pond is a landscape, and most of it is flat, bare, open bottom, where a fish has nothing to hide behind and nothing to eat. A bluegill out in open water is a meal waiting to happen. He knows it. Nothing stays there. And a bass will not patrol water that holds no bluegill because a bass is not out there for the exercise. So everything that lives in that pond crowds into the small parts that have something in them. A fallen tree, a weed edge, a dock post, a rock pile, a place where the bottom changes. Fisheries people put a number on this that I think about a great deal, which is that in a typical pond, something like 9/10 of the fish are holding on about 1/10 of the water. 9/10 of your casts, if you are casting at random, are landing in the desert. That is the whole reason for the empty bucket. Not the bait. Not the hook. Not the moon or the barometer. You were fishing the desert. Most men respond to this by learning to find the good spots, and that is a fine thing to learn. But there is something better. And it is what my grandfather understood, and what the state crews understand. You do not have to find the good spot. You can build one. And once you do, it is yours. It is where you chose to put it. And it will be there for years. Here is what happens when you put a bundle of wood on the bottom. It happens in a set order, and faster than you would guess. Within a few days, the wood grows a film. Algae. Then the small things that graze on algae, insects, scuds, snails, working over every square inch of bark and branch. Wood is enormous surface area. 1 armload of limbs has more surface for that film than 100 square feet of bare mud. Then the minnows come to eat the small stuff and to hide in the branches while they do it. Then the bluegill come to eat the minnows and to spawn in the shelter of it. And then the bass and the catfish come, because that is now the busiest street corner in the pond. And a predator does not need telling twice. You have not made a hiding place. You have started a food chain at the bottom, and it fills itself in from the bottom up. That is why it goes on getting better for years instead of wearing out. Now here is the $4, one concrete block, about $2.50 at any building supply, and if you have an old one behind the shed, it is free. 10 or 12 feet of rope, and I mean cheap rope, the kind on the spool at the hardware store, about $1.50, and a bundle of limbs, which costs nothing at all. That is the whole list. That is $4, and I have never once paid more. Step 1 is the wood, and the wood matters more than people think. The best thing you can put down is cedar. It sits in water for years without going soft. It has that tight branching that makes good cover. And most fence lines have one that wants cutting anyway. After cedar, any hardwood. Oak, hickory, ash, maple, elm. What you want to avoid is soft pine, which turns to mush in 2 seasons, and anything with leaves still on it, which will rot fast and pull the oxygen out of the water right where you want fish to be. Strip the leaves. Dead limbs off the ground are perfect and cost you nothing but the walk. And here is a thing worth knowing. The Christmas tree at the curb in the first week of January is exactly the right thing. And there are men who collect 8 or 10 of them every winter. It is free wood in a shape nature could not improve on. Do not cut a living tree for this. There is no need. There is more downed and dead wood inside a half mile of most ponds in this country than you could sink in a lifetime. Step 2 is building it, and it takes about 10 minutes. Take your limbs, 4 or 5 good ones, each about the length of a man, and gather the butt ends together into a bundle. Now lay your concrete block against those butt ends and run your rope through the holes in the block, around the bundle, and back through 3 or 4 passes, and tie it off hard. You want the block snug against the base of the bundle, not swinging on the end of a long line. 2 knots. It does not need to be pretty. It needs to hold. Now, before I tell you how deep to put it, do me one small favor. If this is landing for you so far, tap the like button, and if you are not subscribed to this channel, take 3 seconds and do that, and switch the bell on so the next one finds you when it comes out. That is the only thing I will ask you for today. All right. Back to the water. What you have made is a thing that will sit on the bottom with the block flat on the mud, and the branches standing up and out into the water at an angle. That angle is the whole point. Flat brush lying on the bottom is a poor attractor. Brush standing up into the water column is a tall building, and every level of it holds something different. Bluegill in the middle, crappie up in the top of it, catfish underneath in the shade, bass on the outside edge, waiting. Depth. In a small pond, 6 to 10 feet is the sweet spot most of the year. Deep enough that fish feel safe in daylight. Shallow enough that the sun still reaches it, and the food chain gets going. If your pond is shallow all over, use the deepest third you have. On a big lake, go 12 to 18, just off the edge of a drop. Do not put it in the very deepest hole. That water goes short of oxygen in late summer in a lot of ponds, and a beautiful brush pile in dead water is $4 in the mud. And build 3, not 1. This is where folks get too careful. Put down a single pile, and then wonder why it is quiet one afternoon out of 3. 1 pile is a spot. 3 piles, spread around the pond at different depths and different sides, is a system, and one of them is always working. $12 and 1 afternoon. Now, step 3, and this is the one nearly everybody skips. It is the reason most home-built brush piles disappoint the man who built them, and it is worth more than the first 2 steps together. Step 3 is placement and patience. Take placement first. Do not put your pile out in the middle of nothing, even at the right depth. Put it against an edge. Fish travel edges the way deer travel fence lines, and what you want is your pile sitting right where a fish is already going to swim past it. The lip of a drop-off. the end of a point. The outside bend of the creek channel where it runs through the pond. The line where the weed bed stops. 10 or 15 feet off that edge, on the deep side. You are not trying to invent traffic. You are opening a shop on a road that already has traffic on it, and put it where you can fish it. This sounds obvious, and I have watched grown men ignore it. If you fish from the bank, it goes within an easy cast of somewhere you can stand comfortably, with room behind you, out of the willows. A perfect pile you cannot reach is a donation. Then mark it. Line it up on 2 fixed things on shore, a fence post and a chimney, a gate and a lone tree, and pick things still standing in 10 years. My grandfather never owned a piece of electronics in his life, and he could put a boat on a spot the size of a wagon wheel from 100 yards out, because he had lined it up on 2 trees 40 years before. Now here is the patience part, and this is the piece almost nobody has the discipline for. Do not fish it for 3 weeks. I know. It goes against everything in you. You have just spent an afternoon building the thing, and you want to see if it works. Here is what happens if you go out the next morning. You will catch 2 or 3 curious bluegill that came over to look. You will decide it is a bust, and you will never give it another chance. That pile needs time. The film needs to grow. The insects need to find it. The minnows need to move in. The panfish need to follow them. And the bass need to work out that the panfish are there. That chain takes 2 to 3 weeks in warm water, longer in cold, and when it is done, you have something that does not quit. Build them in late winter, and let them ripen while you are waiting on the season anyway. That is what the old men did, and now I know why. If any of that is worth something to you, hit the like button, and make certain you are subscribed with the bell switched on. It takes 3 seconds, and it is the only reason a fellow talking about a concrete block ever gets put in front of anybody. Now, how do you fish it once it is ripe? Carefully, because you built a snag on purpose. Do not cast into the middle of it. Work the outside first, all the way around, because the biggest fish sits on the edge and not in the tangle. Come at it from the deep side. If you must go into the branches, go vertical, straight down beside it, so you can lift straight out. Bury your hook point, and run a lighter dropper to your hook than your main line, so when you hang up, and you will, you lose the hook and not the whole rig. Fish it in the early morning and the last hour of light, and leave it alone in between. A pile that gets pounded every day stops holding the good fish. Rest it a week. That is what having 3 of them is for. Now for the honest part, because I am not going to sell you something I have to shade the truth about. And there are 4 things you need to hear. The first is permission, and it is the one that matters most. On your own pond, or on a pond where the owner has told you yes, do whatever you like. On public water, you cannot simply go dumping brush. And in a good many states that is illegal, because it is legally the same as dumping. But here is the good news, and almost nobody knows it. A great many state agencies run brush pile programs. They sink attractors themselves. They publish the locations. Some of them will take volunteers, and some will give a permit to a private party who wants to place one. Call your regional fisheries office and ask. It is 1 telephone call, and the fellow on the other end is usually delighted that somebody asked. The second is what to sink, and what never to sink. Wood only. Do not sink tires. Tires are illegal to dump in water in most of this country. They leach, and the artificial reefs built out of them decades ago turned into an expensive mess that crews are still cleaning up. Do not sink treated lumber, pallets, painted wood, plastic, or anything with a nail or a wire in it. And do not sink anything with leaves or needles still attached in quantity for the oxygen reason I gave you. Clean wood and a block. That is all this ever was. The third is that this concentrates fish. It does not manufacture them. If your pond is stunted, if it has been fished flat, if it has no forage base at all, a brush pile gives you a better place to fish a poor pond. It does not make it a good pond, and I would not want any man to build 3 and expect them to fix something that wants a different kind of work. And the fourth is the honest limit. A brush pile is very good for bluegill, crappie, bass, and catfish. It does much less for anything that lives out in open water chasing schools of bait, and in a big reservoir, it will not do what it does in a farm pond, because there is more water for a fish to be somewhere else in. Small water, big result. Big water, smaller result. Now, why has nobody told you this? Think about what it competes with. A plastic fish attractor, the kind made to look like a little tree, sells for $80 to $130, and it does the same job as $4 of block and rope and a limb off the ground. There is a whole aisle of electronics built on finding structure, and every dollar of it assumes structure is a thing you locate, rather than a thing you put where you want it. There is no margin in a dead branch. I do not believe anybody held a meeting about this. I want to be clear, because I have no use for that sort of thinking. It is quieter than a conspiracy, and to my mind, worse. Everybody along the line simply has no reason to raise it. The magazine does not raise it, because the magazine sells its pages to the tackle company. The fellow on the television does not, because the tackle company pays him. The young man behind the counter does not, because he learned everything he knows from a catalog. Nobody has to coordinate a thing. They only have to stay quiet. And they have stayed quiet for 60 years. We kept it because we had to. When you cannot buy your way to a better afternoon, you learn to build one. That knowledge never lived in books. It lived in fence lines and in January. My great-aunt fished that pond into her 80s, and she outcaught every man in the family, including my grandfather, and she did it with a cane pole and a coffee can of worms and no idea what a drag system was. I asked her once what her secret was. She looked at me like I had asked her which end of a spoon to use. Then she said, "Honey, I do not fish the pond. I fish the places." She said, "The pond is just what is in between." And then she said the part I have carried since, which was, anybody can go looking for a good place all his life. It never once occurred to most of them to go and make one. I have thought about that most of my life, and I do not believe she was only talking about fishing. If this was worth your evening, do the 3 small things that help. Hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel. Turn the bell on. That is the whole of it. And it is what puts this in front of the next fellow who is about to come home with an empty bucket again. So here is what I want you to do. This week, get 1 concrete block and 12 feet of rope. Walk your fence line or your woods and gather 4 or 5 dead hardwood limbs. Cedar, if you have it. Bundle the butt ends, lash the block on tight, and drop it in 6 to 10 feet of water, off an edge, within easy reach of where you like to stand. Build 2 more. Line each one up on 2 things on shore that are not going anywhere. Then walk away and leave them alone for 3 weeks. Then come back and tell me in the comments what state you are in, what kind of water you have, what wood you used, and what showed up first when you finally fished it. I read every one of them, and the reports folks send back are the reason I keep doing this. Next time, I am going to tell you about the 1 hour of the day my grandfather fished, which was not sunrise, and which nearly everybody has backwards. He gave up 2 hours of sleep for years before he worked it out. And once he did, he never fished the other hours again. It costs nothing to change, and it will do more for you than any tackle you will ever own. Until then, keep your line wet, keep your eyes on the edges, and remember that the people who fed their families off this water with their hands knew things we are only just beginning to remember.